You should know that it's something like that. It's not a conversation. That's what I'm looking for.
Yep.
5, 4, 3.
It is 6:30 p.m. and I call this meeting to order. Please stand and we'll recite the Pledge of Allegiance.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Winona City Council. 2 weeks ago, Project Find gave their annual report for the year. And while I wasn't able to attend, I believe some of our council members were there, some city staff. And I do want to just thank Project Find, Fatima and her staff for all the work that they've put in the past year. We are a welcoming city and they help us with that every year. The amount of work that they do within the city is much appreciated. Also that same week, I was lucky enough to be able to testify to the Minnesota State Senate regarding some bicycle infrastructure bills that were in front of the legislature. I got to speak about some of the challenges as well as some of the opportunities that we have here within Winona. And then the next day I was able to present to the Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota and a group of bicycle and pedestrian advocates from around the state. That was I would say a fulfilling thing for me, but also, again, I got to share some of the uniqueness of Winona and again, some of the challenges and opportunities that we have here within our community. And with that, I will turn it over to City Manager Chad Ubel.
Mayor and Council, a couple updates tonight. One, just wanted to inform you that city staff, primarily myself and Chief Williams at this point, also other staff, Deputy Chief Rasmussen, we continue to meet with Winona County regarding public safety facilities. Of course, more specifically, we will now continue to discuss the pro-bill block as an option for a joint public safety facility. The Winona County Board at their last meeting authorized county staff to continue that discussion with city staff. Since the city had this location on their list of options for further exploration with BKV, the city will be funding that option of the study. And again, I'll continue to provide updates to the council at these meetings as we proceed with those discussions with the county. We're also hopeful that our proposals with the state will be included in any final bonding bills. I mentioned that because I was correctly quoted in the Winona Post when I said that we were late in submitting our proposal to the state. But some context behind the word late, it's not late in the sense of a deadline late. The city's proposals, both the riverfront and the public safety facility, were presented to the state later compared to many other projects in the governor's bill. So some of those projects were discussed in last year's session. For example, Caledonia studied a combined ambulance and fire station, and they requested funding to the state back in 2021. Their combined ambulance fire station is in the proposed bill this session. And as I stated in that article, if we're unsuccessful this session, or this round, we'll continue to try in subsequent years, much like the example of Caledonia. Another update is the replica Wilkie at Highway 61 in Huff has been in need of repairs for years. We've made, with the help of volunteers, several repairs to the replica Wilkie. The paddle wheel has recently come off its axle. So if you go by there, you can see that it is tilted. We're aware of it. Both city staff and private contractors have been out to look at it. It is challenging to get there in the winter, but we have had it looked at and we're awaiting quotes for that repair. So again, challenging during the winter, but we are aware that paddle wheel is off its axle. At this time, I'd like to call up Laura Hoberg. At the last council meeting, council Member Iden had asked a question about advocacy and numbers related to the county, so we wanted to give an update, a quick update on those numbers.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So yeah, quick update on the numbers. So at the last meeting, we presented contacts in for the advocacy program. Those are the numbers that we use to track with SEMA, one of the funding agencies for our program, but it's a little bit easier to see the breakdown if we provide you unduplicated numbers. So we have 3 years of data. So on that top row, you'll see clients served. These are unduplicated clients. There might be some crossover between advocates. So typically the advocates have their own sets of clients. They stick with an advocate to receive the services, but they might cross over if an advocate is out of the office and someone has an emergency. But for the most part, these are unduplicated clients. Of those unduplicated clients, we have how many are rural clients. So 100% of our clients are in Winona County, but we do serve folks outside of the city of Winona. So that second row, you'll see clients that are not in city of Winona. That does include Goodview. So Goodview would be considered rural. There are some, it's kind of hard to track these numbers because if a person has a Winona address, but they're living in Goodview, they might be counted as a non-rural client. So we tried our best to keep them separate, but this at least gives you a little bit of a breakdown. And then I think it's also important to include the number of home visits and office visits that the advocates provide. Because transportation is a really big issue in our county, a lot of those home visits are going to be rural clients. So advocates going to the home of an older adult that can't get into the city of Winona proper. So they provide a lot of home visits to their clients, but again, they see a lot of office visits. During the pandemic, we had a lot more people coming into our office because it was an easier environment to control with cleaning and all that good stuff. So you'll see a really high number in 2020, but it does pretty much even out. But again, in 2022, our numbers rose significantly. The advocates are seeing a lot more clients and a lot more unduplicated clients. So even though a person might see an advocate, they're usually working with an advocate probably 4 to 5 times a year. So that's where those contacts in and contacts out are significantly higher than the unduplicated clients, which are still really high for only 2 advocates to serve that many people in a year. Any questions on the numbers at all? Thank you
All
very
right.
much.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Laura.
Appreciate it.
Mayor and Council, also staff had indicated that we would provide an update on the comprehensive plan. So Luke Sims is here from planning to provide that update.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for your time today. I'm here to provide an update on the current stage of the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan has just wrapped up its interim report review from the community. The interim report, that should be moving forward. The interim report was a reflection of the goals and objectives drafted by the subcommittee stage of the comprehensive plan update. As a reminder, we have 12 sections of our comprehensive plan. So we had 12 subcommittees with over 100 participants that met from April through September of last year. At the end of September, we took their draft goals and objectives and only did light touches to make it into a presentable format, which was then brought to and reviewed by the steering committee in October into November of 2022. That interim report was then issued for public response over the holiday period from December 2022 through January 2023. So we have now received all of those responses. And we have been busy preparing an interim report for the steering committee and beginning to go through review and revisions of what the public heard and responded to from those subcommittees. Going the wrong way. There were 3 ways to interact with the interim report. We issued an online survey. In the online survey, we asked if you strongly agreed, somewhat agreed, slightly agreed, and did not agree with each section of the comprehensive plan, and then provided an opportunity for short answer response or long form response. So individuals who are completing the survey were able to respond to how they felt in the general direction of each section of the plan, and then also provide additional comments where needed. We also conducted 7 in-person open houses. Those in-person open houses were conducted across the community, from Maplewood Townhomes over to the City Hall and over to Hiawatha Valley Mental Health and other locations, meeting the people where they are. Additionally, we had the online document available, and anybody could comment line item by line item on the online document, provide feedback that way, and a short form response. Printed versions were available. We did hand out approximately 10 printed versions. Overall, there were 393 respondents providing 647 comments on the interim report. So we've now approached a point where we've had over 2,500 unique individuals respond to a portion of public engagement for the comprehensive plan update. The major takeaways that we continue to hear from the public is that housing choice is the primary concern. Housing choice is something that was brought up at each and every single possible interaction with the public and remains a critical issue for our community. Additionally, the 11 of the 12 sections received a majority of strong support. The one section that did not receive a majority of strong support, heritage preservation, still received some support, or mostly support and strong support. However, there was an indication that it needed to have more inclusive language to include Indigenous populations for the city of Winona. And additionally, there was concern expressed for the blufflands protections, which are in the land use section. There's a consideration for examining the blufflands protections. So that will be brought to the attention to the steering committee and to the planning commission as well. Overall, the next timeline that we're going to see is a steering committee review of the overall interim report engagement report, as well as revisions of the individual sections to match what the public told us during that period of time, followed by a draft comprehensive plan tentatively slated for April of this year, public engagement for the overall draft of the comprehensive plan, followed by a second draft, which will move forward through the approvals process. At this point, the comprehensive plan is still well within its draft stages. We are still seeking input and will continue to seek input multiple times before it heads to the Planning Commission and City Council for approval. With that, I conclude my short update and I'm available for any questions.
Any questions? Jerome?
Yeah, I'm just, the housing concerns, housing choice being a major concern for could you give a characterization of what those concerns are, just in general?
They were very broad. I think that the best way to look at our housing needs, and this is reflective of our 2016 housing study, is an all of the above need. There's a need for subsidized housing. There's a need for general market rate housing. There's a need for more housing in general in our community. What we see and what we presented to the steering committee and our subcommittees is that there's very limited development occurring in the detached single-family home market in Winona, ranging between 6 and 9 single-family homes, typically suburban-style development in our community per year, versus considerably more hundreds of apartment units that have come on since our 2017 Unified Development Code update. So we're looking to see that there's still development potential, and a focus of the plan has been on missing middle housing. So housing that's ranging from 2 to 4 units predominantly, possibly slightly more than that, but are in scale with our neighborhoods and existing development pattern.
Thank you, Luke. George?
Yeah, just one question, Luke. Has there been any discussion on the 30% rule?
We're describing the plan as 30% rule agnostic. So while we're talking about increased housing choice, we're not talking specifically about more rental or more co-op housing, for example. This is setting a 30,000-foot view, broad direction that the community needs more housing. There will be public hearings for implementation and the Unified Development Code, but we're not hearing an appetite at this time from the community to specifically address the 30% rule in the comprehensive plan, and I expect that will continue.
Because I know the 30% rule is very important. You know, the citizens drove this 30% rule. In fact, in Pam's ward, Jerome, Jeff's, Mayor, yours as well too. It's a very, very big part of that of those neighborhoods. So we'll leave it at that for now. So thank you.
Thank you, George. Jeff?
Yeah, I'll reiterate what George said. I know we're in the beginning of this process, and very much it is a process and we're not at an end point. I think in my short time on council, this is the issue that I've received the most correspondence and phone calls on. The concern about maintaining the 30% rule, not opening that door. It was from the things that I've heard, it was certainly for some people, the perspective was it was a hard-fought battle to gain it. It has produced some of the gains that we had hoped it would, and so there's a real reticence to see any exceptions to that or open the door for exceptions to that. So that's kind of one of the part of it. The other part was the specific things around making the a normal lot size able to have duplexes or triplexes without variances. So there was concern that, again, you have a density of housing, rental options around Winona State. And is there a need for more, and really kind of differentiating between the Winona State and student market and workforce housing, which which are two different things. And so it's keeping those in mind as, keeping an eye on how do you manage both of those, especially with Winona State in a current situation where they're having a declining enrollment at the same time that they're building more housing on campus, which would seem to lessen the demand, within, the surrounding neighborhoods for student housing. Whereas the thing that I'm hearing the most is the need for workforce housing, and so, yeah, those are the things that I know that we're in the process, and I think I want to say that so that people understand. I appreciate the comments, but we're not at a finished product yet. We're very much in the process of working towards that, and those comments will be incorporated into that process.
Absolutely, and thank you for bringing that up. The need to balance our approach to our housing policy is something that's definitely critical. The housing choice conversation that continues to arise is really a focus on housing choice, and balancing it with the unique context-sensitive environment of Winona is going to be a fun challenge to meet as part of a planning department's purview to shepherd this project through.
Thank you, Jeff. Pam?
I am interested to hear a little bit perhaps about the what you're calling the transformative projects, because housing is difficult and complicated, and a lot of it pertains to my ward, third ward. But what's going on in terms of transforming the rest of the city? What are these transformative projects?
The transformative projects really settled onto a few that might be a bit more transformative than others, and then a basic comment as well. And I will note, transformative projects had one section where they insisted on including housing as a transformative project, despite it not being a built environment project for the city of Winona. So that's included in there. The Winona State University Fieldhouse, which is a potential project near Sarnia and Huff Streets, and the impact that that would have on the surrounding neighborhood, and the impact it'll have on Winona State University's ability to be competitive athletically and in attracting future students is among them, as well as a makerspace. So emphasis on a makerspace, and what that makerspace looks like, whether or not it's more of a physical space or more of a lending library, is of course up for conversation as well. There was discussion related to public safety buildings as well. So there's a broad range, and I will note that they considered their initial list that was generated by that subcommittee was about 30 different items before they winnowed it down. So it's really quite interesting to see how that process has played out. And I think that we came together with a few items that are probably achievable, but still aspirational, like a comprehensive plan should be.
Thanks, Pam. Anyone else? No? Thank you, Luke. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Council.
Council, those are all my comments for tonight.
Okay, very good. I will now ask the city clerk to take the roll call.
Mayor Sherman,
Here?
Councilmember Young,
Here.
Haima,
Here.
Christensen,
Here.
Iden,
Here.
Borzakowski,
Here.
Gee.
Here. This evening, we have one public hearing. For each public hearing, staff will make a short presentation, and I will ask if anyone from the public wishes to speak to the matter. Each person needs to clearly state your name and address, and you'll be given up to 3 minutes to make your testimony. I will call 3 times for public comments. Once the hearing is closed, the public may not participate in the discussion by City Council.
Item 2.1 under the required public hearings is the proposed electric franchise agreement with My Energy Cooperative. And this includes the actual franchise agreement and a separate ordinance that would set or continue the current fee that is assessed by My Energy.
I thought they were. I move the council introduce those two ordinances.
Public hearing.
Okay, we're doing the hearing first. Right.
I will now open the public hearing. Does anybody from the public wish to speak regarding item 2.1, the proposed electric franchise agreements? Again, I will ask if anyone from the public wishes to speak during the required public hearing portion of the proposed electric franchise agreement. And last time I will ask if anyone from the public wishes to speak regarding item 2.1, the proposed electric franchise agreements. Hearing no one, I will now close the public hearing.
Move the council introduce the two ordinances.
Second.
We have a motion from Steve, a second from George. Any discussion? Or Steve?
You kind of have a point of understanding here. Is this, so I've read through this and I'm serviced by this entity. Is this kind of a leftover from the township being absorbed into the city in about 2001, 2002?
Yes, Mayor and Council, the former Tri-County Electric has changed their name. They merged with an Iowa cooperative. And under Minnesota Public Utilities Commission rules, each electric provider in the state has a separate service area. And the portion of the former Winona Township that has been annexed into the city is still serviced by My Energy. So it would cover those residents and businesses that are in that area.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Anyone else? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. For the remainder of this meeting, residents are only allowed to speak if they have a request before council, and I recognize you to speak.
Under the petitions, requests, and communications, item 3.1 is the Miles for Smiles on Saturday, June 3rd.
Move the council approve the request.
We have a motion from Steve, a second from Aaron. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Item 3.2 are sign requests.
Move the council approve the list. I'll second that.
We have a motion from Steve, a second from Aaron. Any discussion? George?
Just one question. Now Mankato Avenue is no longer a location.
That is correct.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Item 3.3 is the Westfield Golf Club sublease agreement.
Move the council.
Move we approve the agreement.
I'll second that.
We have a motion from George, a second from Aaron. We do have Jim Akery from Westfield here, if anyone has any questions for him.
Anything that they want to tell us or?
Anything you'd like to say?
It's never changed.
Very good.
Could we hear about a new restaurant that's going to be opening there?
Sure.
So Mayor and Council, the application for the liquor license will be presented at the March 6th agenda, and that applicant will be here if you have more questions on their menu. Might be more appropriate for that day.
It's on the How did you know? Thank you.
Very good. Any other questions or comments?
Sounds like good people taking over, so.
Looking forward to it. Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Item 3.4 is a request for a premises permit for lawful gambling for the Rolling Stone JCs to be used at Mackenzie's at Westfield.
Move that the council adopt the resolution.
Second.
We have a motion from Steve, a second from George. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Item 3.5 is the massage therapy licenses for Jennifer Beatty.
Move the council approve the licenses. I'll second that.
We have a motion from Steve, a second from Aaron. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Item 3.6 is the request for temporary on-sale wine and malt liquor license for St. Mary's Church, Luck of the Irish Festival.
Move the
to
council
approve the
approve.
license.
Second.
Motion by, motion by George, second from Steve. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Item 3.7 is the appointment to the WINLAC 1W1P Policy Committee.
Council confirm the appointment.
Second.
Motion from Steve, second from George. Any discussion?
George, thank you, Jerome, for wanting to do this.
Absolutely.
I'm looking forward to it.
So,
And thank you to Pam for being our primary
yes.
council member on that. Absolutely. Thanks, Jerome. Any other comments or questions? Hearing none. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Under new business, item 5.1 is the Winona Transit Operating Contract Extension for the term of May 1st, 2023 to April 30th, 2025.
Move the council approve the contract amendment and direct administration to execute the contract.
Second that.
Motion from Steve, second from Pam. Any discussion? I have one quick question. I noticed the last contract was 3 years. Was that kind of a COVID leftover thing? Do we normally do them in 2-year or 3-year increments?
No, Mayor and Council, the maximum term that we can have under MnDOT rules is a 5-year operating contract. So the first term was 3 years, and this is a 2-year extension. So that's the maximum number of years that they will permit.
To finish that out, basically.
So then we will, in 2 years, do an RFP and open to the whatever operators want to bid on it.
Okay, understood. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Hearing none. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Item 5.2 is the WINLAC 1 Watershed 1 Plan approval.
Move the council adopt the resolution.
Second that.
Motion from Steve, a second from Pam. We do have John Howard, our sustainability coordinator, here to give a short presentation. Evening, John.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I can get the here. I will pull up the presentation. Yeah, it is a lot to go through, 130 pages. So I'm going to give you some brief background on what a One Watershed, One Plan and what the WINLAC is about. And also online, we have Adam Balke from the Board of Water and Soil Resources that knows much more about the ins and outs of One Watershed and One Plan than I do. But so he's here to back up and answer any questions that I can't. So the WINLAC, One Watershed, One Plan. To start with, the WINLAC is short for Mississippi River Winona La Crescent. That's why it's abbreviated to WINLAC. It's a bit easier to say. Under that, under the WINLAC, there's 10 different entities that are participating in the plan. Any local government or watershed district is eligible to participate. So that includes Winona, Olmsted, Wabasha, and Houston counties and their corresponding soil and water conservation districts. Stockton, Rolling Stone, Minnesota City Watershed District also participates. And then the city of Winona, we are the only municipal entity that's participating. And so that it's kind of hard to see on that map, but that is the watershed. So basically any water drop that falls under there is under the jurisdiction of this plan. And there were 3 kind of fundamental committees that worked on developing this plan. There was the policy committee that's made up of elected officials. Each entity has a member on that committee, and they're the decision-making board. The planning work group consisted of staff, such as myself, that put together a lot of the content and did coordination between the committees and the public. And the third piece is the technical advisory committee, and that's made up of non-governmental entities, the state partners, and the other stakeholders who aren't a direct member, and making sure that their opinions and ideas are incorporated into the plan. So that's sort of who was involved, and kind of what is that One Watershed, One Plan, that 1W1P. So traditionally, the state of Minnesota has done county-based water planning. So our Winona County currently has a water plan. It's based on political boundaries. but that doesn't necessarily reflect how the water moves through our city and our area, our landscape. So about 10 years ago, the Board of Water and Soil Resources started moving towards a one watershed, one plan, where instead of, so basically having the planning be around where that water falls, then within the watersheds. And so that kind of multicolored map there are the various watersheds that have been delineated in Minnesota. The majority of them are either in the one watershed, one plan process or have completed a plan. We were one of the last pieces in Southeast Minnesota that didn't have an active plan. And so it is a program that's administered by Bowser, that Board of Water and Soil Resources. And so they've set some guidelines as to what that plan looks like. So that's why there's the different sections that are included in the plan. And also a very important part of that is to have measurable and targeted implementation. So you also saw that in the plan, very specific numbers and figures. And a few things about what this plan is not. It is not a new layer of government. It's focusing on local partnerships and continuing those collaborations. It's not a regulatory program. It's not adding new regulations. It's entirely based on voluntary and optional actions. There are regulations listed in here, but those are not new. That's just stating what is already in effect. And it does not increase taxes. The funding for this for the work that would be happening in this plan comes from the state's land legacy and water amendment through the Clean Water Fund. And so why do a one watershed plan? What does that bring different from our current watershed plan or our current water plan? And one of the clear pieces is there is additional funding, about 2.89 million for the watershed over the next 10 years. So a significant boost to funding. It also, by participating, opens up new funding grant opportunities that the city can participate, the other entities can participate beyond what's offered in that watershed-based funding. And it's also a plan that can be adapted and modified as time goes on. It's not meant to be a static plan. And so we started the plan in July of 2021, started that planning process. The first pieces were to reach out to the community, the committees, and identify the issues and priorities. From there, it was presenting those to the public to make sure we had captured what those important issues were, see what we had missed, and also get their thoughts on how to prioritize. From there, we set goals and really got in the heart of the plan of defining what the implementation actions would be, those long tables and the 34 different priority areas. And now we're kind of at that last step of the review of the different parties and taking it back to Bowser. So if all goes to plan, this plan would be wrapped up and approved by about June of this year. And so the key thing is this was led by the public. Well, the ideas that were presented, the ideas developed by the committees were presented to the public just to check that we had captured those correct issues and to better prioritize those issues. And also to note where in the watershed efforts should take place. So there's a priority of what we do and also a priority of where it takes place. And then also there's suggestions on how those issues should be resolved. That was another important piece. And so we were lucky to have the kickoff session. That's what's in the picture there. That's the Tao Center and had a pretty good local representation at that meeting. You saw this in the plan, but we are guided by the mission and the vision statement. That's what's been approved by the policy committee. About clean water, balancing ecosystems, sustainable farmland, and having diverse communities. The vision, I won't read it to you. You can read. So, once the plan is roughly categorized into 4 different categories: groundwater, land use, surface water, then habitat and recreation. There is interplay between those, but that is generally how we broke out those issues, just to have a better cohesion and understanding of those priorities. And I've listed here the 10 highest priority issues. The priorities were broken into A being ones that would be addressed very quick, being first priority, the ones to be addressed immediately in the plan. B issues were ones that should be addressed during the plan, but are lower priority. And then finally our C, which are the issues that may get addressed and may get kind of wrapped into other actions of A and B. But these 10 here are the ones that are the first priority. And The arrow points to the urban stormwater piece. That is probably the single goal that has the greatest kind of interaction with what the city does and what kind of where we would probably be most active in the plan, being the largest entity by population and impervious surfaces as well. And so, as I mentioned, in addition to having those goals, there's also a focus on where. So the maps that accompany all the different goals, they are color coded to show typically a medium, a high, medium, low priority or non-priority areas. And so that's you can't really tell on this map, but it shows a wealth of information. And yeah, there are probably 4 areas I would say are most applicable to city operations. As I mentioned, urban stormwater. That's really a lot of what we work on. Aquatic invasive species is an important consideration, both controlling what we have in Lake Winona and the Mississippi currently, and probably more importantly, keeping things out that aren't here yet, but could be in the near future. Nutrient management isn't something that the city necessarily works on much, but it does impact our waterways quite a bit. So that implementing this plan could have a profound impact on our water quality in our lakes and groundwater. And then water storage is another piece where I think this plan will be helpful and to continue on work just with the ever-present threat of flooding and localized issues. So that's the whirlwind tour of what this plan covers. The next steps for this plan are kind of have each entity review the plan as we are tonight and to seek approval of those bodies. Once the 10 approvals are granted, the Bowser will take a review from their regional and then their state committee to also hopefully approve this plan. And after that point, the plan would be in effect. The next actually item on your agenda is to establish a joint powers agreement or to approve that. And that would describe how the different parties will work together. And once all those pieces are in play, then we'll have a work plan to actually utilize the plan and access the funding and the dollars. And now I will turn it over to questions. And as I mentioned, Adam, I believe, is on the team meeting and can probably answer some of the more specific pieces to the One Watershed, One Plan methodology.
Very good. Thanks, John. Steve.
John, first of all, thank you. I mean, clean water, we all have an interest in that, whether the water is above ground or underground. So excellent. You've answered a lot of questions and it helped the public understand costs because so I understand we're not raising taxes. We're not yet. I see, I read through the pages here and I had a conversation on this, a price tag of $13 million over 10 years. So where does that money come from? And the 13 million came from somewhere and you had said that there's no cost for us. So help the public understand
that. Sure. So the approximately 10 million, I think it's 10.5 million, is accounting for money that is currently spent by the various partners. Their annual usage, about $1 million combined on water quality projects within the watershed. So that's adding up that amount as kind of estimation of what would be, assuming a status quo on local government and county funding. So that's the bulk of the plan is continuing efforts with kind of existing funds. And the remainder, that about 2.89 million, is the additional funding that will come in by having this approved One Watershed, One Plan.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's entirely possible that entities will reduce their funding or increase their funding, but it's up to them. That 13 million or so is the estimate of what would be spent on water quality projects over the 10-year timeline of this adaptation of the plan.
Sure. Final question. Do you anticipate down the road that there could be, you had said there was not a cost to us, and so it sounds like you're taking existing money that's being spent and a little bit of extra money, and then that's how we got to that 13 million number. Okay. Do you anticipate that we would be asked for funds in the future, or do you anticipate that we would be asked to enact regulations?
Certainly not as part of this One Watershed, One Plan. It would be entirely up to the city if we wanted to contribute more funds for projects or enact regulations. But this coordinating group would not be asking that of the city.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Steve. Any other questions? Pam?
I just have a comment. I've served on the policy committee since the beginning of One Watershed, One Plan. And one point that I think needs to be brought out is that this takes all of the projects that might be entertained and might be put forward that should result in clean water, and makes them non-competitive for grant funds. So all of these projects all throughout the whole region have been competing for money from the state and from other entities. And now they will be in a plan that gives priority to certain projects and allows funders to take a look at the plan as well. They're not competing anymore. And that by itself, I think it'll be a great efficiency.
Thank you, Pam. Any other comments or questions? No? Thank you, John. Appreciate it. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Item 5.3 is the WinLAC One Watershed, One Plan Joint Powers Agreement.
Move the council adopt the resolution.
Second.
We have a motion from Steve, a second from Jerome. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Item 5.4 is the Electric Vehicle Smart Cities Program.
I would motion supporting participating in the EV Smart Cities program would be in order.
We have a motion from George, a second from Pam. Any discussion? Jeff?
I'm just wondering if somebody can give me an outline of what this actually is.
John Howard would be happy to.
Mayor and Council, this program would be a technical assistance and kind of cohort learning process. So Great Plains Institute it would be leading this effort. They are an entity based out of the Twin Cities, and they've received a grant from MnDOT to sort of do this coordinating work and education on EVs. So in general sense, they'd be helping the city and other participants understand best practices for siting charging stations, how to get funding for those from grants.
Okay.
But part of it is also very tailored to our individual situations. So we could be asking for, if there's specific areas that we want help with, there is a carve out for individual assistance on understanding various aspects of electric vehicles.
Is this primarily for public, so government entities that are using electric vehicles, or is this primarily for private ownership and developing infrastructure to increase that?
This program is strictly for the public entities, and it can really be for both municipal operations, or you could focus on private adoption of electric vehicles. It's flexible as to how you. Well, I think we'll be learning about some of the drivers of both of those, but I would see our emphasis being more on the public side of where should we put chargers, if there's any regulations we need to be clear on for those.
Okay.
And actually how to take, with the new Inflation Reduction Act passed in August, there's the ability for publics to receive the tax credits on electric vehicles. Previously, that was not something that could be done.
Okay. Thank you.
Steve?
So I'm seeing here that some in the letter that's being put together, letters being proposed that we're asked to consider supporting. That some of this is dealing with, as you said, charging locations and whatnot. You know, my concern, and I think the concern should be for the public, when we have a government entity trying to, first of all, my opinion is government entity will come up with the wrong answer at a cost of probably 10 times what entrepreneurs and consumers would take to come up with the correct answer where vehicle charging location should be. What we have here is a classic situation of government intervention distorting markets, and I resist that. Remember, this is the same government that can't make a toilet seat for under $400. Government should stick to what it does best. Sewer water, things we talk, clean water that we discussed tonight, wonderful. Public safety, roads. I'll support this, but I want the public to see what's going on, that we have, and this government intervention in markets is going to cost us, my opinion, Steve's opinion, this government intervention, especially in electric vehicles that are probably going to come, is going to cost us dearly. And I'm concerned about it. So I will support it, but I have reservations. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Jeff?
I guess I would have somewhat of a contrary view. I think there are areas like this where government expertise is required, because this is not something that I know enough about to make decisions. That's for sure. So I would rely on people that have the education and the ability to make recommendations and suggestions that I'm unable to do. So I think there's a role. I understand the skepticism. There's been some, there's some classic, examples of things in the past, but what doesn't get cited is all the examples of success and things where actual government intervention can save a lot of money and coordinate services to have a more economical outcome. So I don't know where this one's going to land. I don't know enough about it, but I guess I start from a different point of view. I don't start from a skepticism. I guess I would start with from an optimism.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. Any other comments? George?
Yes, I'm going to support this tonight as well, but I do agree with many of the points that Councilman Young brought up in regards to this with intervention and things, but I am going to support this tonight, so.
Okay, thanks, George. Jerome?
Yeah, the word that jumps out to me on this in the letter is infrastructure. And that is definitely a concern of government, a rightful concern of government. The orderly and effective management of infrastructure. Electric vehicle charging is going to have an impact, and we should be ahead of the game rather than playing catch up. So I think that this is a good step.
Thank you, Jerome. Aaron?
Mayor, I'll support this too tonight. Do I think we're going to see electrical vehicles in ice cold Minnesota? No. I don't think in the near future that's going to happen, but I do agree that we need to have a proactive approach towards this. So I will be supporting this tonight.
Okay, thank you. Pam?
Just a personal note, I just got back from, I wasn't at the last council meeting, I was on the West Coast, and I just drove for 4 days across the country. And the thing that it was surprising to me was how many charging stations that I would see along the interstates now. Some of them were private. You would pull into an area and Tesla would have 15 charging stations right next to a restaurant because it takes 15 to 20 minutes. Others that I pulled into were public. The city had them, and in a spot along that they wanted to promote people to stop and spend 15 to 20 minutes for charging. So it's something that it's not in my world. I don't have an electric vehicle. It's not in my future that I'm probably going to purchase one, but I just recently had this, and I can tell you it is becoming part of the rest of the world. The other aspect of electrical vehicles that I'm understanding is the problem area is not cold, it's heat. Heat is what zaps the range of an electric vehicle. It's not cold. So you may be surprised what you're going to see here. And the thing that's surprising out west is how many pickup trucks, big, large Ford F-150 Lightnings are one of the most in-demand vehicles in the United States right now. So it's probably coming.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay.
I think this is starting to sound like a good conversation over beer. But if my reading of history is at all right? I think that we wouldn't have electrification of rural areas or cities if the government hadn't intervened. So it's a natural part of the process, as I see it. Anyway, see you for beer later.
Thanks, Pam. Only three of us at a time though, right?
Okay,
Yeah.
right.
Thanks, Pam. George, go
Yeah,
ahead.
just one other note. I mean, electric cars and vehicles and motorcycles and all that. Yes, it's a thing of the future. It's going to happen. I just hope it doesn't go down the same route that propane went, that was going to save all this money for semi-trailers. And I know two companies that got involved in propane, and as fast as they got in, after losing millions of dollars, they quickly got out of having propane for their semis. But I think this has got a little brighter future. And as Aaron mentioned, Minnesota, we're 20 below zero. We'll wait and see. It's early, so.
Cold weather does affect charging up to twice as long. If you look at the studies or talk to someone who has an electrical vehicle.
Was up on the Iron Range this summer, and Hibbing, Evelyn, they've got charging stations. So I think in the Miami of Minnesota, we better have some too.
Miami, Minnesota, yeah. Chad.
Mayor and council, just maybe one obvious comment. I think what's important that John mentioned is he gets into a cohort and we get some baseline information, because you hear the discussion. It's good. We've got information about cold weather. We've got information about heat and how running your air conditioner affects battery life. We've got certainly these discussions about where infrastructure can go. And I think also why it probably goes without saying we brought it forward for council to approve, and again, to have John get some more baseline information from cohorts.
Thanks, Chad. I'm not chiming in on this one. I'll let everybody else take care of that. All right, any more discussion or questions for John? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Opposed? Motion passes.
Item 5.5 is the Habitat Enhancement Landscape Pilot Grants Program.
I move the council approve the locations for SWCD grant application.
Second.
Motion from Steve, second from George. Any discussion?
I wonder if we get more elaboration on these specific projects, particularly the ones in Lake Park.
Yep, Mayor and Council, I'm happy to talk about that. Also, on the Teams meeting is Amanda Gentry with the Soil and Water Conservation District. She's the representative of the entity that would be applying, and I can speak to I think one of the areas. I'll start west to west-east. The wetland area off of Dakota Street. That's an area that there's been some interest of how do we solve the water issues there? What do we do with those? One idea is to have put in wetland species that can just naturally live there and probably will look better than kind of grass that can't be mowed. That's one theory. And the specific area that was called out is the area that's identified in the Fish and Wildlife Service wetland map. So it's an area that even if we wanted to do anything with it, it would be challenging to really do other than restoration. It's labeled, categorized as wetland. So this is just kind of keeping it as it is. The area behind the Masato cherry trees in the shoreline there, that specific area was simply because there's some not particularly ideal vegetation that's growing there. It's kind of a mixed bag. We had the county's first identification of Egyptian walking onion, a novel invasive species that probably isn't going to be a problem, but we found that last year, and so it's an area that thought there could be some added benefit to adding some shoreline stabilization and just some other native species. And then the Unity Park section and at the southeast corner of the lake. The logic there was there's in the Unity Park itself a number of areas that hold water and don't really drain very well, and so this is a way to add some, also just add some more beautification to those areas. They rather than filling in, they keep those, just add some color for the native vegetation. And along the southeast area there, a spot where a lot of reeds and kind of cattails are taking over. This would be a buffer to those, and also be low enough where it wouldn't interfere with kind of the viewing of the trail in much of that area. And might keep a few discs from flying in on long throws. And I think that's would be hole number 7.
So a question, John, in regards to this, I'm looking at the map here, that's, the page 223, where you've got the 0.89 acre help grant site. So are you saying that that site itself is considered wetland?
Yes, that I don't know what shape that is, but that's more or less the outline of what shows up in the Fish and Wildlife Service wetland map as wetland.
Really?
Yeah. And I don't know if Amanda, if you I think you maybe saw that map too and could maybe.
Because I guess I guess I'll elaborate my question, because I mean, obviously this was all filled at the time, that they built the high school, I assume, back in the 1970s. And, and I'm familiar with this site because I can see it from my house. And it's like all of this fill, it's slowly sinking. And so I'm wondering, when did it change from being fill and usable land to now being designated as wetland? I mean, it once was wetland and then it was filled, and now it's slowly going back to it because all fill sinks. So I'm curious.
Yeah. Well, I might ask if Amanda, if you know anything on the timeline. I want to say that the most recent was like 2013. That's when they kind of did it was mostly an aerial review.
I'm not sure when this specific location would have been identified. I know that, around Lake Winona, previously, historically, it was very wet. So the fact that fill was brought in and now it's sinking again doesn't necessarily mean that it can't be reclassified as a wetland again as it sinks. So I'm not sure when it was designated a wetland, what year specifically. That would be something that we could find out through the Fish and Wildlife Services data, though.
I'm just curious, because I'm assuming if we're going to seed it and then we're looking to keep it as a wetland, and it's a large park area that may or may not have better uses. We had kicked around the idea of one time here earlier this year of community gardens. This was a site that was considered a little further down, a little closer to the high school, was one that was at least talked about. So I guess I'm minorly concerned that if we're going to, if this is going to take on a wetland designation and we're going to seed it as such and we're going to treat it as such, that we're going to preclude any other usage of this area, which I think is something that should be talked about before we go down that road.
It's already designated a wetland by Fish and Wildlife Service. It's already designated that way. So if you were wanting to do something other than restore it to natural wetland ecosystem habitat, you would have to go through the WACA permitting process. So that's something you could do. I'm not sure what the outcome would be.
Okay.
And actually, one activity we're hoping to undertake this spring is to do sort of an evaluation of the other areas in this general vicinity to say yes, wetland, no wetland, and kind of get that.
Right, because at the same time, on the other side of the road that you see there, you've got a very large dirt mound that you are eliminating, the wetland problem in the outfield of the softball diamond. So, I mean, within 100 yards of each other, you're treating two properties, opposite. And so I just find it curious. So.
Pam?
Could you comment on that? Has that project with the dirt pile and all of that, has that gone anywhere?
Mayor and council, my understanding is that project is on pause due to the wetland considerations of, if this is a wetland, then that might very well be a wetland too, to make sure we kind of cross our T's and dot our I's that we're not violating WACA, and making sure we're following the same kind of rules as required. But yep, that, or as of now, that outfield isn't technically wetland, but certainly to the average viewer walking by the park, you'd have a hard time necessarily saying it's different.
Well, it's a more recent thing. I mean, that all started about 7 years ago. And prior to that, the outfield didn't flood. And so once it started, you got it compressed and because of the changes in rainfall patterns, it's more likely to do so. So, and to answer your question, they've been bringing dump trucks full of dirt there for the last 2 months. So there is a pretty good stockpile of dirt there that looks like, the idea was to level off the outfield with the infield and make a usable ball field again, like we have in other softball fields and what have you throughout the city. So this is one that I think, like I say, I don't want to take up any more time, but this seems to be strange to me that within 100 yards, we're treating things quite differently. And so I guess I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
So Mayor and Council, I think John alluded to this, is that these are the questions that I think from more of the Park and Recreation Department aspect is what we want to clarify. And so that we've, in a sense, pushed pause on the outfield work until we get a determination if that is in fact wetland. And if it is, then we may have to do some mitigation efforts to continue with that process. But I think what John is outlining here in this, oblong shape is, again, Fish and Wildlife have designated this a wetland, and so development there is, unlikely, as Panda's mentioned. Unlikely in the sense of, yeah, we'd have to go through a process then to either do other mitigation efforts if we wanted to develop this area.
George?
Yeah, just one question, John. Does a wetland, does it have to be wet? Does the soil and grass have to be wet? Because I know I've seen some where they are in floodplains, but they are totally dry. Is that possible? I mean, a wetland does not have to be wet.
That is correct. It has to be wet for a portion of the year, and I think Amanda might be able to tell you exactly what that is. I want to say it's like 3 weeks, but Amanda, I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you happen to know what that is?
So for wetland determination, an area needs to have 2 of 3 characteristics. One is hydric vegetation, one is hydrology, which means water, and the third is soils. So soils, they're looking for hydric soils that have, the rust spots and beige colors in it. They're looking for, with hydrology, water within 12 inches of the soil surface for a certain amount of time that can create the hydric soils. And then vegetation obviously is on the surface, something very easy to see. So, but there's certain species which are considered hydric and indicative of wetlands. And there's a whole wetland delineation process to determine that area.
Now, would a piece of land being in a floodplain, would that be considered a wetland?
Some areas are, and some areas are not. It depends on how well it drains, what soil types are in that location. If you have sandier soils and that floodplain drains very well and is only seasonally flooded during snow melt and heavy rains, then it likely will not be a wetland.
Thank you.
Like Prairie Island Park, for instance, not floodplain, not a wetland.
Okay.
Mayor Council, I think the other piece, maybe John, I think Councilmember Jaime mentioned this briefly. Maybe you want to expand, or I certainly can as well. But it's really just this oblong area. If the city would determine that a community garden would be best on the north side of really this map, or I guess the south side of Lake Street, that still could be processed, or could be, I hate to use the word develop because that has a different connotation, but that for that purpose, it could be developed in that area. Really, it's this oblong area that we're talking about doing those grasses. So in preparation for this, and I certainly don't mean this in a flippant nature, my years in Park Rec, I think I've heard at least 24 options for this area between the high school and really between Sioux Street and Dakota. And really the park department hasn't developed any of this area for a myriad of factors, certainly including public input, the residential area, what it could be used for. But again, this is an area that is usually focused on because it's some of our last open green space, and we've been, from a park rec perspective, have been reluctant to develop anything in this area for the sense that we would lose that open green space. That's some of the historical pieces of it as well. Now, that also does not mean that on the east side of Sioux Street that we couldn't do some other park development there. Of course, the neighborhood has said, the taking out of the playground that was consistently underwater, that they would like to see some type of play structure be brought back to that area. Or again, the community, maybe perhaps the community garden could go in that area. I don't think that those, my previous comments preclude that. I mean, we'd like to see it as open green space and preserved as open green space, and not necessarily, again, not always the correct word, but developed. Like, that there are places within Lake Park that we'd like to keep open and green. And this is certainly one of those areas.
I guess, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. I guess the other aspect to it is I think if we're seeding, and saying this is going to be wetland, I mean, there's for lack of better words, there's a bug factor that goes along with standing water in that area, gnats and stuff like that, that is impacting on those that use that area. There's sometimes in the summer where it's almost unusable to use the bike path because of the clouds of the bugs there. And so I don't think it's in the city's best interest to be doing anything that's going to promote that. Likewise with, the problematic aspect of, in that playground area that you spoke of, and in the outfield where you have ducks and waterfowl and defecation and little kids playing in water. That's not healthy. So, I mean, I think there's a health component as well as that goes into this. So I won't take up any more time with this. I guess with approving of the grant, are we saying that is the result that is going to happen, or is that is what is going to be explored? So what is exactly being asked of us here with the proposed motion?
Mayor and Council, the motion, as I understand it, would be to include these in the application for funding. So they would also go to, this is a Bowser grant. So we may not get funding for this specific project, but this would be to include in that application.
And if we did get the funding, would there be any more discussion or determination as to if this is the best use, or is that a done deal if the funding is approved?
I'll look to him.
Yeah, so these areas aren't set in stone yet. They're preliminary project sites is what they're being called in our application. That we have areas that we anticipate could be beneficial areas to establish this native pollinator habitat. And moving forward, if we receive the grant, those areas will be explored first. It's not excluding other areas if other areas are better suited for it.
And maybe I can add, my understanding, Amanda, is that if as long as it's the pollinator plant, it doesn't necessarily have to be a wetland species. We could go to a different area of the parks and do a prairie type. Doesn't necessarily have to be a wetland type piece. This is just one area where it seemed like it might be
Well, I'm just trying to get a grab, being that I'm a resident in this area, I don't know that any of the other residents have been involved in a conversation around this. And so I'm very hesitant to agree to something and lock anything in that hasn't been discussed publicly within the neighborhood or had the opportunity to. And so so that's where I'm coming from. I'm not trying to be, to hold anything back, but I do believe in public input, and I don't know that it's happened in regards to this. This is the first I've heard of this.
So Mayor and Council, one suggestion would be is that you could approve the attached locations for inclusion in the grant application, and within your motion say that if funding is provided, that these locations then come back to council for review. If that's what I'm understanding from Amanda, that there's still some room for further investigation into sites. But that, I guess my suggestion would be that you'd include that then in your motion, that if granting does come forward, that this comes back for more discussion.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Yes, I just wanted to make a pitch for wetlands. Wetlands provide a lot of services and wetlands do a lot of good. And we're in the process of trying to clean up Lake Winona. Okay, clean up the water quality. That's an avowed important project for the city. All of the water that runs off of Lake Street and runs off the roadway and the parking area has to go somewhere. And if it goes into the lake, so much the better. But if it gets filtered through a wetland, it will be cleaner. So I'm just making a pitch for wetlands.
Jerome.
Yeah, I think I would, I back up what Pam just observed, along with the observation. I've walked past that many, many times, and for most of the summer, it's a duck pond, and when it's not a duck pond, it's some really scraggly lawn. And I think that just aesthetically, having a natural vegetation that thrives under those conditions would be an improvement to the park.
Thanks, Jerome. Chad, you want to shift focus away from the lake for a second?
One final comment that I did want to make on this item. Good discussion on the lake area, but the Woodlawn Cemetery area also included as a location is a vital component to the Bluff Traverse project. And that creating this area, doing work in this area will help in our mitigation efforts with our rattlesnake permit that is required for the Bluff Traverse. So this piece, although it may seem, for lack of a better word, inconsequential, because again, we had some good discussion about the lake. This location is a vital location for that Bluff Traverse project.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, John. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So. You want to
Sorry,
read
Mayor
the
and
mo-
Council, Monica, do we need to redo the motion to include?
Yeah, I would prefer, yeah, I'm sorry if I'm not
Okay,
getting the
sorry about
procedures
The
right.
motion was by Councilmember Young and seconded by Councilman Borzakowski. And it was the staff recommendation to include those locations. If you wanted to have further review, you could make a motion to
Okay.
amend the motion.
Okay, I would make a motion to amend the motion that if the Lake Park sites are included in the grant, that there is a further review in regards to those.
Any seconds? Hearing none, that amendment will fail, and then we'll go back to the original motion. All those in favor of the original motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
And moving on to council concerns.
We'll start with Councilmember Borzakowski.
Thank you, Mayor. We were just noted as being, was that the cutest downtown or the cutest city, whatever it was? Am I right on that? Or the cheeriest city? And when I read that, it took me back to 1976 when Winona was named an All-American City. Why were we named an All-American City? because we were friendly people. Our city was clean, and we had a vibrant river, and we just simply had a vibrant town. But that took me back to 76, where we were named, that there was only so many cities named, and Winona was one. And President Jimmy Carter at the time, about a year after we were named an American city, was down by the levee on the Delta Queen, him and his wife and daughter. So, and we wish the best for former President Jimmy Carter. But this just kind of brought to mind how, they put the criteria, how the buildings look so nice. And it just took me back into 1976. So, and that's when the Eagles came out with Hotel California. And I was young then. Anyway, I would just like to pass on a few condolences tonight. Longtime Winona residents. First of all, to James Paskowitz, known more as Jabbers, heavy equipment operator for many years for Winona Plumbing and other companies. And Jim was a great fisherman. If he would catch the fish at Sam Gordy's, he told you he caught them in Tremplow, and everybody headed to Tremplow. Also to Lorraine Greenwood, she was 97 years old, volunteered with many organizations, very active in the church and civic associations. Wish her family well. And also to Jeanette Berg. Jeanette Berg received the Bishop's Medal of Honor for her work at the Basilica of St. Stanislaus, and she will be missed by her family and friends. And finally, to Robert Cheerboy Ives. He was the city sports historian. In 1978, who made the winning shot? He'll give you the name and where he made it from. Condolences to all four of these families and all good people that we will remember. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Councilmember items. Very good. Councilmember Young.
George, how long was your hair in 1976? Was it?
I was not totally bald yet, but I was working on it.
All right. Hey, I want to congratulate the girls Nordic ski team. They won their section a couple weeks ago. They competed at state last week. It was a great achievement by them. Sonia Semling, Olivia Tykrow, Anna Gilmer, Ava Pike, Ruby Kessel, Molly Ping, Kayla Pike. Two boys competed individually, Rory Briggs and Tanner Benson. And it was great to see these young people achieving their goals and skiing their hearts out. So congratulations to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Councilmember Rapinski.
Thank you, Mayor. Just want to remind citizens as you are shoveling and snow blowing, please keep in mind the height of your snow piling up on your boulevard, as sometimes that can make it difficult to see cars as they're coming around the corners and stuff. And if you happen to have a fire hydrant on your block, if you could help shovel or snow blow out around that fire hydrant to take some pressure off of our great firefighters that we have, it would be greatly appreciated.
Very good. Thank you, Aaron. Councilmember Haima.
Nothing further tonight. Thank you.
Thanks. Councilmember Christensen.
Just add to Ripper's comment that it is snowing. We have alternate side parking. It's an even day tomorrow. And with the amount that's forecast, I'm sure that they'll be out doing some tag and tow. And let's not make Borkowski's any more wealthy and if they do get towed, it's not Borzakowski, so don't call George.
Thank you, Councilman.
And since no one else said it, drive safe, take it slow, take care of yourselves out there. So.
And under the consent agenda, there are 3 items: approval of the minutes from February 6th, the final adoption of an ordinance to designate 30-minute parking on 3rd Street, and an ordinance to establish handicap parking on 2nd Street.
Move to approve those items.
Motion from Steve, second from Pam. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Being 7:48, I move we adjourn.
Motion from George, second from Pam. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.